Om yo brahmanan vidadati purvam. Yo vai vidamscha brahanohi tasmai. Tanha deva atma buddhi prakasha. Mumukshurvai sharnamaham prapadye. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. That one formless presence, out of which sprang the Holy Trinity, at the beginning of a cosmic cycle, and who delivered the Vedas unto Lord Brahma, who is the eternal bridge to immortality, who is partless, faultless, actionless and divine, who resembles fire that has consumed all its fuel. I turn for refuge into that singular one, whose light opens the third eye and reveals the essence of the Atman to all beings. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Jayanti Mangalakali, Bhadrakali Kapalini, Durga Kshama Shivedatri, Swaha Swatha Namostute. Jaya Narayani Namostute, Jaya Narayani Namostute, Jaya Narayani Namostute. Hail to thee, thou Kundalini, thou victorious and ever pure Kali, the gentle one who bears the skull, the compassionate one who is the primordial cause of all. We sacrifice ourselves and bow down unto thee. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavo Vahoi, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us, and may Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the studies. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Today, on Sunday, which is our predilection to do, we gather to dispense the nectar of non-dual truth in the form of Dharma, or Atmagyan, or Vigyan. That's the central focus of sincere seekers who need to claim for themselves Viveka, the first of the four great disciplines, Sadhana Chatushtaya it's called, wherein one acquires the ability to separate the wheat from the chaff, if you want to use older biblical terms. Or as Vedanta puts it, know the difference and distinctions between what is real and abiding and what is unreal and fleeting. Unreal here doesn't mean necessarily illusory, as some people then sometimes get alienated from those great statements of Vedanta early on, because they want the world to be real. We all want the world and our experiences to be real, and there is a way of making them real if we act and live dharmically, and if our consciousness is centered. But otherwise, philosophically, sometimes it's off-putting for people to think about the term unreal. It really means fleeting or transitory or ephemeral or changing, mutable. And in all of that, it is exacting and true that Brahman is the unchanging reality. We always uppercase all the letters in association with that divine reality. And we just chanted 2 chants basically about Brahman and one about Mother Kali, because today we're looking at doing a series on Kundalini Yoga that focuses on and around the Jnana Chakshu, or the Dharma Eye, or the Third Eye, or the Eye of Wisdom, or if thine eye be single, the single eye, as in said by different great luminaries in different traditions. It's a very powerful center there that can signify anything from concentration to non-dual samadhi and the meditations that happen in between. It's definitely deeper and higher than the heart chakra or the throat chakra. Chakra is a word here which means a spiritual vortex. We often like to say it's not in the physical body, these 7 centers, because I've brought a couple charts. We'll show you. Actually, one of them is 7 different systems in 7 different darshanas of India. So this idea that Kundalini has about the 7 worlds, or has been there in Vedic and Tantric and Yogic history from time out of mind. And you even find mentions of it in Judaism and the Middle Eastern traditions too, not just the Far Eastern ones. In that way, it specifies something innately intrinsic that's inward, the kingdoms of heaven being within you. So chakra is an interesting word then that we like to entertain in spiritual circles. It's struck me sometimes that I should preface all my classes with a subtitle or a saying that states, "For those who believe in something other than matter." Because listening to esoteric systems like that, and particularly probably Kundalini Yoga, and the 7 chakras, could seem very much at odds with the way people who believe in matter only or physics only look and see things, and have seen that way for 250 years of American history and several thousand years of European history. And so there's a lot of water that's gone under the bridge in terms of examining this Maya or samsara, the cycles of birth and death, the evolution of things from a power source, whether it be a Big Bang, a physical force. And so those are ways in which people are used to thinking about matter. And when you approach a system like Kundalini Yoga, and like today centering around the 6th chakra, which is called Ajna Chakra, then you're looking at something completely esoteric and very different to the way people think. So I have to preface it by saying these classes are for those who believe that there's something more than matter, or something other than matter, which matter covers a wide spectrum of things, objects that the senses fixate on, even obsess with, or enjoy. That's like 3 levels of object there. You can enjoy it, you can actually then fear losing it and obsess with it, and then you can get addicted to it. So it seems like all the relationships with material objects that are possible to the world are fraught with risk and danger. So that's what unreal means in that context, that you shouldn't form a death grasp on them as if they were the only thing, because you give them up in deep sleep tonight, and in meditation you like to get beyond the thoughts of them, have different samadhis that are of higher awareness. So these 7 chakras then can be used to evince many levels of teaching, not just their own context, which they're seen in. That my consciousness is somehow higher today than it was yesterday, or it's centered in a higher place. I feel more in my heart today. So I'm more of a loving person, but then I begin hating and I feel more in my base chakra now. Or all of a sudden I had a non-dual experience and I jumped to my third eye, or my 7th chakra, crown chakra they call it. It's kind of how people are measuring it, as if it's some sort of a gauge, like one of those circus things that you take a sledgehammer and hits a bell up high. Where is the bell of my consciousness on this gauge in any given time? So that's not a very thorough way of measuring the awakening or the rise of Kundalini Shakti. Mix that word Shakti with chakra, but they're very close. There is a spiritual energy, and it's not the material insentient energy of matter that is constantly in flux and changing, and even disappears before the eye when you examine it too closely. Changing at a billionth of a second, they say. This is something more substantial as far as your faith is concerned. It may be something a little less believable. So there again, the moniker. These teachings in this class are for beings who think that there's something beyond matter, or know that there is, or intuit that there is. And I've brought several charts with me then that will show us in different contexts these 7 chakras. Now the focus is on this Ajna Chakra, or 6th chakra. And when a being rises there, all the vagaries and vicissitudes and even varieties of Maya begin to disappear. It's like we were talking today in our drive over here to our sweet ashram here called Kedarnath in the mountains on the big island of Hawaii, and talking about how Sri Ramakrishna used to say, the further one goes toward Brahman, the farther one goes away from the world. So in that way, the human mind has a tendency to forget the world at times, and that's when it enjoys peace. When it remembers the world, then you've got peace and its opposite, and happiness and its opposites, and contentment and its opposite, and peace is probably penultimate to or close to a non-dual experience. So it's very much coveted by living beings. The peace that passes all understanding might be a far cry for most people, but just your basic peace of mind day to day is something that you're supposed to hold on to. So if you're holding on to the atomic particle that's changing, it's going to be very hard then to hold on to this representative of non-duality called peace of mind, which people are complaining about nowadays as having lost. I don't know where my peace of mind went. It's either gotten lost in depression, tamas, or it's gotten lost in restlessness, rajas. It's a very simple way of putting it, that you might say, if you could look at the 3 chakras, the 3 gunas in context, in comparison to the 7 chakras, and you might want to say there at the 3 lower worlds is where, tamas and rajas are in operation so much. And then when I come to the heart chakra, then sattva and pure sattva, as Shankar called it, begins to click in. So the higher my consciousness is in, the less I suffer these gunas of nature, which are flowing in and out through everything. And becoming a problem in the human mind. They flow in nature, they also flow in your energy, but they flow in your mind predominantly. If you can control them in the mind, then you can control your energy, called prana, and then you can control your outer life, as far as that's possible here in this first chakra, called Muladhara. Muladhara, the base chakra. And next week and the weeks after, and I think this is a 4-week series we're at, and we want to look at some of the more specific teachings to each particular chakra, because we do have, rare as it is in this day and age, a Kundalini master. You very seldom even hear that system being practiced very much. I think basically everyone's practicing it who's a spiritual aspirant. They just don't know or have a name for that energy that's awakening in them. Energy is a word that's even misleading, because you'll sort of go back to science and physical and kinetic energy and electric energy, and all those things crowd in on the mind, but we're talking about a vital energy at its fundamental basis, and then a psychic energy, and finally a living energy called Shakti. You might be able to allocate all those kinds of energies to the 7 chakras too, to find out where your mind is concentrating on or fixating on, as I said. And then do a study of yourself. Examine snow conditions, like the Eskimo. That is your own consciousness, to find out where my consciousness centers in any given time, not where it ping-pongs to or comes and goes from or lifts off and returns to, because you can lift off from the heart chakra and go to a non-dual position and come back to the heart chakra, as Sri Ramakrishna used to do. By the way, he's that Kundalini master I just mentioned. And the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna is the superlative book on Kundalini Yoga. It's not called that. In there you'll find a great being, avatar, Paramahamsa, whatever you would like to call him, as Vivekananda said, a great luminary or living enlightened soul, having experiences of this awakening of Kundalini Shakti throughout his life, not only in his sadhana period, but after his sadhana period. And so he becomes the example for all of us who are interested in this specifically mystical kind of path. Now, Swami Vivekananda used to say, I don't really like mystics as a class. They tend to cover things and make them secrets. He wants the Vedanta to be living, open to everyone. So he was a very unique kind of soul. But we use the term mystical here in terms of Kundalini because if you compare it side by side with all the other yogas and all the other darshanas and different paths, you'll find out that this one truly has mystical implications to it. And it doesn't mince any words with the fact it's got its own vocabulary for what's happening inside of you. A unique kind of Sanskrit, I would say, because there are Sanskrit that's in the glossary, there's Sanskrit that's in a dictionary. But there's also Sanskrit that's specific to Gita, that's specific to Upanishads, that's specific to Kundalini system, and to the Ramayana. And at different times, Sanskrit was used in these different systems, and you'll find these words burgeoning out of the experience of the seers and practitioners and luminaries of those systems, because they weren't in any way limited in wording. That's one of the things we love about India. I mean, I was writing yesterday in an email to people about how you can use this medium of language in an unlimited way. You're going to be able to create new words that suggest themselves to you. And since there's nothing new under the sun, they've come from an old memory back inside of you or inside your race or inside of history that somebody all of a sudden rediscovers because Mother speaks it to them subtly inside, maybe in those chakras, like the throat chakra. Because Sri Ramakrishna used to say, this great Kundalini master I'm focusing on here at the beginning of this first class in the first half, he used to talk about, Divine Mother sits in my throat, and I open my mouth, and she pushes out the words. And what do you mean, they say? She said, well, look at the marketplace there. People come with rice and in wagon loads, and they dump piles of rice there in the marketplace on a cloth, and then they'll sit there doling it out in bags, and people will pay them the annas and the rupees and so forth, and they'll sell that rice. And by the end of the day, the pile of rice has gone down. But just about when it's about to expire, then another wagon load comes from the countryside, dumps another pile of rice there. So he's using that analogy to how Mother keeps him supplied with this rice of wisdom, of wordage, of verbiage, not just mundane verbiage, which we looked at remember, week before last, the common mantras we were talking about in that 3-part series, which we just finished, Success in Mantra Practice, which now is going to be up on YouTube very quickly, and giving people a lot of teachings on the mantra, which I think is excellent for the American culture right now. Mantras, the superlative practice to mature themselves so that they can have non-dual meditations in the future that aren't just flashes in the pan kind of experiences, but actually grow by stages. We'll look at that in a minute, how beings can grow by stages in spiritual life. So pushing forth that rice all the time, he said, she sits in my throat. He said, Saraswati sits in my throat, and I open my mouth, and she pushes out all these things to say. So he had an endless wisdom that he was transmitting to people all the time. He could come out of the deepest samadhi and all of a sudden start talking this wisdom. Sometimes he'd come out of the deepest samadhi and you'd have to give him a glass of water, and he'd have to touch water and bring his mind back down to the realm of the 5 elements, because if you go to these higher senses, these higher chakras, then you've gone beyond the world. The further you go towards Brahman, the further away you go from the world. See? So sometimes you have that very nice saying in Kundalini Yoga that there's 3 above and 3 below. So they specify the heart chakra as being something you need to awaken. That's why I just said, I'm living in my heart today, because everything is, the grace of the Lord is everywhere. I'm feeling good about everyone and everything. There may be horrible things happening in the Burloka and with my ancestors and karmas fructifying everywhere, but I'm seeing it all as a sort of a mirage, and I'm just in this higher state of consciousness where I'm not being affected. I'm in a sattvic state of consciousness, and last week I can remember not being in that state of consciousness, and it was already getting to me, I can tell you. See? So consciousness, as it shifts, that is a way of using a gauge to measure where your consciousness is. So 3 above and 3 below means the heart chakra is the 4th chakra, and there's 3 below and 3 above. Specifically the Muladhara, the Svadhisthana, the Manipura at the gut. The heart is called the Anahata, and then Vishuddha, Agya, and Sahasrara, the 1,000-petaled. And so that was Kundalini Yoga's gift to India, and by the way then on to humanity, of how to propose a system that would maybe intrigue us because of its mysticism. In some ways you might want to let go of foggy mysticism around yoga and superstitions and religion and so forth. It's not living up to being religion, it's more like irreligion, Vivekananda has said. But in Kundalini Yoga, that mysticism should attract us to something esoteric. And in that way, then we would begin to find out how to awaken to higher levels of consciousness. Right now it's just, okay, you've come to the path, meditate in some traditions. And so there's no other instruction, you just sit. So you're going to have to work out all of that karma and samskaras and past lifetimes and the business you still have with your ancestors back inside of you and your family life that's out there and money and job and everything. You're supposed to work that out just sitting, see. No tools there, no method except meditation. And that doesn't seem to be working very well for a cross-section of people who get interested in spirituality, if we can use the word. Vedanta, Advaita would be better. And Buddhism and its higher flights, also in its Zen and its Tibetan forms, Madhyamaka and so forth. These are all very, very highfalutin philosophy for the mind to not just entertain, but contemplate and open up. So then you might talk to somebody who's aware of the chakras and they're thinking they're somehow in the body. But then they themselves will talk about how they felt a rising of energy and it took their mind away from problems in the world. And so is that still in the body? Or did your consciousness actually ascend or descend, inward ascend, as we call, to this prime place of refuge where consciousness dwells in its own nature. It's pure in its own nature. So for those who believe in something more than matter, material, objects, and the mundane rounds of human convention, then the Kundalini system will probably appeal to you and to listen to it. So for the next 4 Sundays, over 12 hours, we'll try and present a journey to the Ajna Chakra. So you could call that a sort of subtitle for this. We're going to go inside and we're going to take you on this inward journey, inward ascension, toward this 6th chakra, where if you were to look at it in terms of the 7 worlds, it would be very much akin to the Tapar Loka, or a loka where ascetics and austere beings keep a subtle body, who haven't completely merged yet in Brahman, because that's something that the tradition is very, has a lot of unique things to say about too, merging in the highest, in the deepest, becoming one with the formless light, or as Shankara may have put it more simply, the hailstone of my mind fell into the ocean of Brahman, see, into the surge of the wave of the Atman off of the breast of that ocean, and then it just became one with that. So your hailstone is still there as a body-mind mechanism when it's occupying the 3 lower chakras. Sri Ramakrishna gave a very simple teaching: eating, drinking, and sex life go on at the 3 lower chakras. I think you'll see that in one of the quotes that we have on these charts coming up. I can mention it aforehand. So, of course, there is a kind of eating, drinking, and procreation that happens at a higher level, like the rishis blessing their food, taking that food into ojas, higher energy, and then having relationships with their consecrated partners, and then producing illumined children, or highly qualified children who have come to them from inside of their own minds to possibly, as Krishna says, pick up a thread of the yoga and perfect themselves. Because if you want to look at another 3 above, 3 below teaching, you've got the 14 worlds, see? And Earth falls right in the middle of those. So in this way, there's 6 above and 6 below. And or you could say 7 above and 7 below. They're called patalas below, deeper, hellish kind of existence that you'll find explained more in Tibetan Buddhism and so forth. But they're there, called patalas in the systems of India. And then you've got these 7 upper worlds that, like I mentioned one of them just now, Tapar Loka. So these are all within you in consciousness. And the mind can visit them in a flash in a dream, flash in a meditation. The mind is the fastest thing on record. It can outstrip everything except Shakti, and she's the one that's opening up these visions or these spectacles, these moments of insight, if you will, for the mind to visit. And the more facile beings, the more accomplished beings are doing this consciously. Their dreaming is consciously, their deep sleep is conscious, their meditations are conscious, and guess what? Their actions out here in life also are conscious, because they don't want anything to get in the way of their inner experiences. How many things are in the way of people having inner experiences? You could be practicing hours and hours a day and be very dedicated to your path, to your guru and to the teachings, Guru, Dharma, Sangha, but still your actions outside are working against you. Not necessarily because it's your fault, but your body-mind mechanism is here in Maya, and the whole world is mad, you see. And a lot of crazy beings, even people who are pretending to be sane, who are doing insane things, like going to war against other nations, but at home they're all peaceful and happy and proud of themselves, you see. With the bombs bursting in air, you know, the red rockets, red glare, the bombs bursting in air. How many times I had to sing that when I grew up in grade school, you see. Salute a flag and sing the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air. I didn't like it back then, and I hate it now, that there would be that kind of hypocrisy in all the nations of the world. So that even Mother India would have a flotilla of battleships now. So some of them sail into our own islands here a few years ago and shoot missiles across neighbors' borders and things like that. Do I have to go on explaining how the world is insane? How people would do that to one another? When the very premise of yoga is nonviolence and truthfulness, not hypocrisy and lies, or false faces, fair faces but false hearts. Sorry, fair faces but false hearts is how Vivekananda put that. So, if you're looking at systems like that measure the whole gamut of consciousness in centers where people gather. That's why I say the chakra is like a spiritual vortex. It's like a city inside of you. You know, if you looked at a city from a helicopter in the air at night, you'd see all the lights, all the roads leading into the city, all heading towards Grand Central Station or whatever, you see, and all the people going along these external nadis, because nadi is a word we'll look at soon, and we'll look at it in terms of the word granthi, how nadis get blocked. So just like there are traffic jams going into Chicago and New York City every day, and into Kennedy Airport, stacked up in the air, those would be like granthis in the physical, and due to certain complications and problems and overpopulation and people's running to get things for themselves and being about business and money making and so forth. It's the same way in your spiritual life. The inner city is called a chakra, and there are basically 7 great cities there. If you want to assign a city to this Sahasrara, it's going to be very hard, you see, because that's unbounded and open. It's pure conscious awareness itself. Hard to define or describe something like that. But you see, there's a great city at each one of these chakras, or is a spiritual vortex where thousands of souls, billions of souls really, are coming in out of nadis. These nadis are made of thought, of consciousness, that is, of lower consciousness in the lower centers or cities. And if they ran towards objects and greed and dishonesty and hypocrisy when they were on earth, they'll run toward the same things when they die. There are worlds that will provide that for them. The freezing, cracking hell, the burning, blistering hell. Just look into Tibetan Buddhism to find out the description of some of these places that people travel in subtle nerves towards when they exit the body. The body's only just one tiny little portion of one little world, which is called physical. You have another body with 5 senses in dream tonight, and you have a formless body called deep sleep, where you're still there, but all the objects are missing. All the worlds are gone. And you're not assessing this. Somehow you're not providing for it inside of your ideology, and you don't have a philosophy around it. Well, India did, many. And over each age, it produced another great soul to produce another system to explain it to you in that way, in its own language of Sanskrit, and eventually Pali in Buddhism, to where everything, as the world was modifying, so were these systems and these great souls that came to show you still the same thing, still the Father's house with many mansions in it. Why have you given up exploring those and limited yourself out here to these outer nadis only? The outer nadis only would mean today, medicine. That's what it is. We're concerned with ill health. We want to live forever. We have longevity as a problem. That's one of the problems of Hatha Yoga. Sri Ramakrishna said, the Hatha Yogis, they seek longevity, living in the body for as long as they can, and mostly for the wrong reasons. So this kind of great problem in us is going to cause us to explore plant life, chemicals, and combinations of things, so that we can have a ready medicine for anything, any malady that comes up to ail us, and so we can live longer and enjoy more food and enjoy our senses. But our senses are already defective. Because they're outward going, the Mundaka Upanishad says, they're defective by nature. And you're not exploring your inner senses. If you were to man your inner senses and dream tonight, you'd have some very powerful experiences. Those are called visionary dreams. They occupy a higher level of dream. That's where you might have your vision of Moses or Muhammad, or a great bearded sage or seer came to you and revealed to you. Here's your life on a tapestry. This is where you're going. Your first great spiritual experience of insight, which impressed you in your teens or 20s, hopefully, when you had something like that happen to you. And you remembered it, and it left a mark on you. And it caused you to be a seeker. And it caused you to aspire to be a devotee of God, or a lover of consciousness, a friend to mankind. So not man unkind. It wasn't called that. It's called mankind. So we need to do what the word tells us to do. If it's mankind, then we should be friend to man. And it should cross borders. There's no such thing as a foreign religion. I said that to a Christian priest some months ago, who definitely took issue with it. Well, there's definitely such things as foreign religions. We keep our borders shut to that. And so whatever the predilection or preferences of people in the world, this Kundalini system is and all the systems of India, of the Sanatana Dharma, the eternal religion, have tried all through history to keep these channels, these nadis, N-A-D-I-S, subtle nerve passageways, mostly existing in your mind, in your consciousness, not here outside. There are versions of them outside called nerves, and for those you're going to get medicines to open up, you see, or herbs, or elixirs. India provided for that too, but it always called it an inferior way of proceeding. Herbs, elixirs, and so forth. And those who seek health through herbs and elixirs and medicines, they never realize enlightenment. That's a statement by the father of yoga and the statement of commentary by the father of Vedanta. It's one of the 5 types of seekers who never realize enlightenment. Why? Because it fixates them on the body, and the body is not the self. So you're not learning your lessons by even the basic fundamental statements of Vedanta, of the Vedic lore, of the Tantras, of yoga, of Samkhya, and later of Buddhism and Zen. And it doesn't end there. Pretty soon, like I was studying the exoteric principles and vows of Buddhism the other day, and one of them is you should not touch, drink, or sell alcohol. You cannot be a Buddhist if you're involved in any way with that stuff. And that should be common sense to people. The minute they smelled it, looked at it, or tasted it, they said, that's evil. See? But you've got a country here in America that's based on 2,000 years of Europe, where they've been producing wines and saturating themselves in it for years and years, centuries and centuries, till now it's become some sort of a sophisticated art that you practice, to taste it and roll it on your mind. But you never tasted your own consciousness and rolled that over your consciousness. You were just involved in nerves in the tongue, you see, connected to your five senses. So you're going to have to develop an interest, and it's going to have to be at the expense of apathy, that you develop an interest in your highest good, in your true nature, in your Atman, in your Buddha nature, in your own consciousness with a capital C, and what it has to tell you. And therein you have a system like Kundalini Yoga, with Mother Kundalini herself, as I just chanted, Jayanti Mangalakali. She's victory to the most auspicious one. She's the most auspicious energy, if you want to dumb her down to that kind of a word, in all the worlds. Not just the three worlds, in the seven worlds. Because all the seers use her to get out of the three worlds, beyond earth and beyond ancestors. Basically, eating, drinking, and sex life pretty much is just about physical beings, elemental beings, and heavenly beings, if you want to use three words to borrow from our English. So you're cycling on this wheel of ancestor, human, elemental, ancestor, human, elemental, when you're restricted to lower nadis with addiction to prana, life force. So in the Upanishads it says, it's not for the sake of the wife that the husband loves the wife, it's the sake for the Atman in the wife. It's not for the sake of the baby that the mother loves the baby, it's for the sake of the Atman in the baby that she loves it. Well, you could turn that on in another direction and say it's not for the sake of cocaine that people get addicted, it's for the sake of the energy, the feeling that cocaine brings. It's not for the sake of alcohol, you see, but it's the prana in the alcohol that makes them desire it. So this energy is in everything. If it wasn't, then even the clouds would be, without rain, see, as the Upanishads say. So higher thinking comes when you entertain systems like this, and it comes to people in stages. And I could go on and on with preambles. You know me, I like to introduce my subject, get us in the mood for it, and reason, and try and appeal to you. I mean, the beings here in this room, mostly my own students who have been with me a long time, people who will watch these in the future in the live streaming, or who are watching right now, welcome and salutations to all of you. They need to then have an appeal, you see, every time they take up the Dharma, because it's so vast. There's so many facets to the Dharma, so many different kinds of teachings. And if you place them all under the umbrella of Dharma, they're all good. They do run a gamut of low, middling, and high in the Dharma, but all Dharma transcends morality. So one of the points we've been making here is that if you just have a morality, it's subject to immorality. And it's less likely that when you understand the Dharma, it will become subject to adharma. Not in any given age in which it's being given. Maybe over the long reflexive time, as Krishna says in the Gita, yes, we'll see religions come and fall and get resurrected again, because they're all coming out of this one eternal truth with this one eternal teacher who doesn't mind or obey borders. he'll step right over those borders because there's no limitations inside of his nadis. His pathways are all flowing free and open. We say his and her because she also comes as a great soul like Sri Sharda Devi, my teacher's teacher, and Sri Ramakrishna's divine consort. So I said Sri Ramakrishna is that Kundalini Yoga expert that we can go to nowadays because it's very hard to find someone who's out there teaching. There are people giving talks maybe on it, and it's coming from more of a new age kind of level of things, like, oh, the chakras are in the body and various ideas like that, which are fantastic, in a negative way, fantastic. And what you really need to do is find a great soul who has actually experienced the flowering, the opening of chakras. And Sri Ramakrishna has, we will see that in the next few weeks, descriptions of how these opened to him as he brought his consciousness to them. He awakened her, then brought his consciousness to them. And my way of teaching that is that she's already there in all the chakras. So you're getting on board of a sort of elevator, Shakti elevator, and she's arriving you at the next floor of this 7-tiered castle. And when you get out of that floor, you see she's already there waiting for you. What took you so long is her mantra, you see. And welcome, welcome, O ye shining ones, come to the realm of the gods. Or you look at the realm like Sri Ramakrishna does, I don't want that. I want deeper. Oh, get back in the elevator, we'll take you to the heart chakra. Or we'll take you to the throat chakra. Or we'll take you to Tapar Loka where the ascetics are. Ah, that sounds good. Because, as I heard one of my students say just the other day, is everything is nothing. And nothing is just everything. So you've got this unique non-dual perspective that's being given to you in stages by which you're understanding the depth of your own consciousness, the eternal nature of your own consciousness, the intrinsic divinity of your own consciousness, which is all non-dual. It doesn't have anything to do with moving from stage to stage. It's just that moving from stage to stage by avastas is necessary for people in these 3 realms. So you'll see more of that if it's a little foreign to you so far as you're trying to entertain something that's beyond matter and objects. You'll see over the next 4 classes that we'll be looking specifically at different sets of 7s that have been proposed in every darshana from time out of mind in India. It's not about to be forgotten. It's just like this is not about to be forgotten. Why you have 5 fingers and 5 toes, and why there's 5 elements here, and you have 5 senses, 5-fold mind, and so forth. None of that's going to be forgotten by India because that's the template, that's the way in which consciousness works its way into lower worlds and then transcends them, like waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. It comes and it goes. Krishna says that in the Gita. Nobody sees the Lord as he takes the 5 senses and comes and goes in a body and gives it up. Like they don't see bees going from flower to flower gathering nectar. See? It's beautiful. The perfect analogy. So everything around you, see, if Sri Ramakrishna heard that sloka of the Gita, he would go into a high state. His consciousness, if it were at the heart, would be gone and gone forever. You'd have a hard time bringing him down. He used to pat the top of his own head sometimes. Or when he's trying to talk to people and explain to them the beauties of Kundalini Yoga, and by talking about it, she began to rise inside of him. He would say, please, mother, not now, I'm busy, you see. Please stay down here at the throat so I can talk to these people. Otherwise, I'm worthless to them. Oh no, we want to see you go into samadhi. Well, do you have a couple hours to sit there and wait till he comes out? Because it wasn't just a 2-minute meditation or some fake, some fraud, or some pretense. He was actually taken out and up and out of this 3 worlds into higher centers where he had experiences that he would describe to you later. How did it feel? Well, I became a salt doll and I decided I wanted to measure the depths of the ocean. of bliss that I saw there in front of me. So I went towards it and got in, but I dissolved there, so I couldn't come back. So nobody could ever explain how deep the ocean of Brahman is, or its infinitude, its eternal nature, which is why I just chanted Tanhadeva Atma Buddhi Prakasha. I mean, this is a great, great ocean of consciousness in which even the Atman dissolves into. If you take the words I'm saying here and you join them with your mind, then you join those two with your intellect, then you join those three with your ego, and then you join those four with your witness, then you might get an idea of what he's talking about in his experiences of Kundalini Shakti at a very high level. Finally, you would join the witness and all of those other four that were prerequisite to it into the non-dual Brahman. Why? Because Brahman is the soul of everything, Shankara says. It's the soul of everything. And so much so that they say that's all that there is. So you've gone towards Brahman, so how far away did you go from the world? You've gone so far away from the world to know that it never existed in the first place. It was a dream you had. And you probably had it over a series of lifetimes. And in each lifetime that you went in stages, you gave up more of it. See? So by the end of any given lifetime, you're saying, I'm almost there, Lord. Come, Mother, come. Take me beyond my ancestors. I'm definitely not down with them anymore. All blessings be upon them, but I'm not getting off at that floor anymore. See? I have some of my own students, some of them Hindu, Indians, that say, well, this is our last lifetime. We're not coming back here again. So they've come to this kind of resolve in their own minds that enough of this, you see. And so they've outgrown the desire of the senses for their objects and pleasures. They've had a taste of something deeper, more meaningful. And it's probably been because of words they heard. The Vakdevi is in those words. Goddess of wisdom is in those words. They're not low-grade mantras that they got tired of. They're very high-grade mantras that inspire as soon as you hear them. Atma Buddhi Prakasha. I just said, what's that mean? I don't even know what it means yet, but I'm already inspired to hear it. So I must go and find out. So as we speak in this way, then, let's look at this first chart so that we can make some headway. All around this idea of the Ajna Chakra, or sixth center. I'll look at that more specifically in this chart, but I want to start by showing you how Sri Ramakrishna described the growth of a spiritual aspirant in 4 stages. And that growth is going to be up to 7 chakras. They're going to open up these nadis, realize themselves at a higher level. And so you can see each of these 4 boxes is pointing to a different level of attainment, and with some classifications within them, which will be very helpful to us, particularly if we consider ourselves to be sincere spiritual aspirants, and we're serious about the path. As I was saying on the email the other day, expression out of the 60s, the adventures of consciousness. You see? So you're engaging in the adventure of consciousness, your own consciousness. And it's not going to be satisfied by courting the 3 worlds anymore. The mundane, the habitual, the conventional, the superficial, the surface. The living in imitation of everyone else, just mundane imitation. That you're going to want to you've already probably outgrown. So then you've probably at that point become a pravartaka. Sri Ramakrishna says here, and that is his great student, and Swami Vivekananda, said, there are stages of spiritual growth in mankind. Each one is necessary. This is the essential of religion. Know that every undertaking must pass through a lot of obstacles. Truth triumphs if only one pursues a peaceful course, which has been my experience in whatever headway I've made in the spiritual path in this lifetime, is that I've always done it through peace, which means taking a vow of peacefulness, keeping a peaceful mind, following the rules of ahimsa, not harming other beings in thought, word, or deed, as much as far as possible as I grew and matured and heard the Indian Dharma from my teacher in my early 20s, and had all my experiences with the ancestors prior to that, and compared the two later on, then I knew that my bread was leavening. See, I was rising. See? And my consciousness was beginning to expand in its capacity to know Brahman. That's a quote out of the Upanishads. Your consciousness must expand in their capacity to know Brahman, in its capacity to know Brahman. Because we know consciousness with a capital C doesn't expand and contract. That's Brahman. It's like I just say, befaft, partless, faultless, actionless, and divine. It's a new word I've invented, befaft. So it's partless, actionless, faultless, and divine. Created that for my friend who's a professor in college back in the mainland, East Coast. He likes words like that. So if Brahman is partless, actionless, formless, actionless, and divine, then it doesn't expand and contract. It's pure and perfect, eternal, infinite, homogeneous, boundaryless. And my mind has to rise in its ability to, its capaciousness. It has to expand itself and become more capacious, so that it can grasp on to some of those great axioms and principles that exist in Brahman. So Vivekananda said, follow a peaceful course. And if you do that, then you'll skirt most of the problems of the day. Because your society is quite often violent, your family fighting, your cultures are fighting. See, they're restless, they don't have peace. There's no example for you around here except the example of an illumined soul who's exemplifying how to live peacefully, like we saw Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj. May peace and bliss always be upon him in our lives when we were growing up. Luckily, we had a great soul like that in such a unimportant place as Portland, Oregon, where I lived and grew up, here in the West, in America. So that's a good preface. See, there are stages of spiritual growth in mankind. This is being said to you by the greatest non-dualist of the age. Certainly among one of the greatest. He epitomized it perfectly. So he said, so he's giving you this teaching that it's okay. You can say, I'm not perfect. I'm not the Atman yet. Because you're not the Atman until you realize you're the Atman. That's a plain truth that should slap the pseudo-non-Advaitists in the face. No, you're not Atman until you realize you're Atman. You can't pretend it. You can envision it as a possibility, maybe even as an ultimate truth, but then you're going to have to be practical and say, why am I falling off of that realization in my meditations and in my daily actions even, as I was saying? Why are my acts running counter to my deeds and my deeds running counter to my thoughts? And my thoughts not centered in Ishvara or my Ishtam or the non-dual Brahman? These are questions you need to ask yourself. So if you're a pravartika then, and this is a teaching given by Sri Ramakrishna, let's just give an overall definition with the quote from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna at the bottom of this chart. He gives you an overall reading of all of them. The pravartika is a beginner. He puts marks on his head and body, wears a rosary around his neck, and strictly follows outer observances. And Master's talking about India here in the 1800s, and prior to that when this teaching was on the scene. Now the second is the sadhaka. The sadhaka is more advanced. He has lost his penchant for outer show. He longs for the realization of God and thus prays to him earnestly. So not out, not back or up, but inside. Prays inside to that great self within him. The siddha has firm conviction that God exists since he has seen him. So a siddha would be a more perfected soul. But Sri Ramakrishna goes beyond and said, then there is the siddha of the siddha. What about that being? Has not only seen God, but has talked to God intimately. As if you were talking to your own true self. You found somehow your own true self. It's about time we met. I have some words for you. Let's communicate here for a change. Self meet the self. So this is why I was saying the ego could then dissolve into the witness, and then the witness could then dissolve into the Atman, and that bridge would be made. The bridge to immortality we just chanted about at the beginning of this class. He is the eternal bridge to immortality. Partless, faultless, actionless, and divine. So with that general description, and we're starting with this so that we can see that in this inward march to the third eye, or to the Ajna Chakra, that there are stages which the soul will go to. There'll be, assaults on the gate of the third eye and fall back. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, I used to run a boat race from the heart, throat, to the third eye center, and back again to the heart. He saw boat races going on the Hooghly River there in Calcutta, where he lived, in the Kali Temple. So he said, well, that's just kind of, you could see what he was saying. There's a river, which is a Nadi. There are people in boats, which are souls, moving up and down in vessels, which are body-mind mechanisms. And there they are racing, you see, up and down the river and winning prizes and so forth, or losing, as the case may be. So when he walked out and saw that, he said, that's just like my inner race, from the heart chakra to the throat to the third eye and back to the heart. I'm running a boat race, he says, inside of myself. Teaching in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. So it does then bespeak of not necessarily seeing and conquering yet, but preparing and purifying. We were talking about that recently, is that, say you did all your work on a room in a house and you were going to move in there, but you didn't take the cobwebs off the doorway, so you never let yourself go in that room, even though the room has been all purified. But there's these webs in front of it, and you can't see very well, and you're suspicious of it. You don't know that it's been thoroughly cleaned, even though you thoroughly cleaned it yourself. So people are not allowing them access to their own consciousness this way, because of some cobwebs from cultural overlays and from constricting upbringing and ancestor worship, and ritualism, and things that, irreligion and so forth, that are going on. So they're not allowing themselves into places they've already prepared. It reminds me of Sri Ramakrishna's story about the yogi living in a cave that has a series of caves. There must be 1,000 caves back in that mountain. And he knows there's a bear living in one of them. It's very unlikely that he's going to run into that bear in his daily life, but it's always on his mind. So one day, because he could one day run into that bear, and it wouldn't be a very good hair day if he's still got hair. So in that way, it's this idea of not being able to allow yourself to go a place because you haven't examined it and allowed yourself into it. You're your own worst enemy. You're keeping yourself out. In that way, you probably should look at opening up these inner realms inside of yourself with a positive attitude, knowing that that thousands of beings have told you that they exist, and that they actually consist of higher existence, not lower existence. So if you went out and saw a boat race, it would just be an example of what's inside of you. If you looked on New York from a helicopter at night and saw a city with a bunch of roads, it would just be an example of a city inside of you. And so everything gets paid into spiritual life, because spiritual life and Brahman are the only real existence. Everything else are outer experiences that are unreal, fleeting, ephemeral, transitory, building a house on sand instead of bedrock, and so forth and so on. Places where birds have nests and foxes have holes, but you have no place to lay your head there. It's not your refuge, it's not your home. And you're thinking it is all this time, and thereby not allowing yourself to access these inner. So Pravartika is beginning to penetrate through that. He says, he observes outer religious formalities. He follows a daily routine of mild general practices. Oh, I think I'll meditate for a half hour. I think once a week I'll read from a scripture, or maybe I'll go see my teacher once every 2 months for a retreat. You see, it's not intensifying it yet. He does regulate food and refines dietary habits. So he's made it that far, and hopefully he's not going to make a food fad out of that. As Vivekananda says, in India today, your religion is all in your stomach. It's all in the cooking pot. Because that's how important food came in the Kali Yuga, where it's everything to everybody, sustenance and so forth. But you don't live by bread alone. So there must be this other energy you can open, like, say, Kundalini Shakti. Are you going to think about food when she's around? Or will she feed you off of her own breast, see, with a nectar? It's not mother's milk from a physical body, but it's pure sustenance itself. You think her children ever go hungry, spiritually or physically? So the Pravartika is there, and she also reads religious books and to strengthen their faith. This is like Gasato ma sadgamoya tamaso ma joitir gamoya. You're going from lower truth to higher truth, and it's okay that you do. Forget about non-dualism right now. You'll be able to deal with that later when it's time, when you've qualified yourself. But right now, do the basic qualifications. Clean out the room, remove the cobwebs, chase the bear out of with some fire out of the place. Whatever you need to do, so you can move in and stay there. I'm talking about chakras, you see. You might want to consider not staying at the lower 3 chakras, where your ancestors have their play, over and over and over again, in lifetimes without end. It doesn't matter if science comes along 200 years ago or less and talks to you about evolution, that you were once climbed out of the ocean as a one-celled animal and worked your way towards a monkey over millions of years. Finally, you were 15 million years in the human form, standing upright. That doesn't matter, because all that time and long before it and long after it, eternally, will be going on this involution evolution, which is not a line going back or forward or up and down. It's going in. It's constantly playing off itself. This is good, but this is also a problem with your ancestors. So you can't just give up science and the 7-day creation theory as your chief ideology and then take evolution and involution of Samkhya Yoga to be the ultimate truth, because you're still on a wheel until you arrive at this 4th chakra. So the benefit of knowing about the 7 chakras, the 3 worlds, because we say Shanti, 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 may peace be to all of them, is that you can transcend them. Now you know what they are, you know how limited they are, you know where you've been coming and going from, and now you can give them up. Master gave me all the mantras connected with the deities, Holy Mother said, and they all contain the power of renunciation. So the mantra will help you give these up. Just use your mantra and run towards Brahman and leave the world behind. It will take care of itself. It has been from time out of mind. So a lot of this you will find in religious books, and this will strengthen your faith. Finally, the Pravartika engages in actions that increase mindfulness. That's what can be said about this beginning stage of spiritual life. I would say, get it done with and become a sadhaka. And I think that's where the West is right now, America. There are some practitioners out there who have discovered some of the benefits of asana and pranayama, some of the benefits of organic food, and are beginning to have experiments, I should say rather, with the mantra and with some meditation. But the intensification of the process has not kicked in yet. As it has, it's in very few souls. Where's our Jivan Mukta, for instance, my teacher used to say, America, will you produce a Jivan Mukta for me? Then my 50 years of teaching you here until I'm 95 will, I'll feel good about that when I leave the body. If you can produce me one Jivan Mukta. That's a living, liberated soul. Where are they? We've had them by the hundreds and thousands in India, over hundreds and thousands of years and lifetimes. They gave us these systems. Where's your system? Getting attached to illusory particles? Is that your system? Trying to keep the body alive for over 100 years? Is that your system? All the time hogging all the resources for yourself and not sharing them with others? Is that your fine system? Give me a Jivan Mukta, then I'll know that you're worth saving. You're just not another flash in the pan like other cultures that have been in this Kali Yuga in the past. So what is a sadhaka then? That intensification kicks in, conducts sadhana on an internal level. So you could see that's a very important point, isn't it? Isn't a lot of this dietary and also external? And that's why puts marks on his head, wears a rosary and around his neck, and strictly follows outer observances. So that's not a very advanced soul. That's a beginner, pravartika. But a person who all of a sudden conducts sadhana on an internal level, as far as the Akshi Upanishad, and you've been watching those classes that I've been giving in Portland over the last year or so, they put it as that at that point, in that doorway of yoga, you've escaped transmigration. You do hold in your head the idea that I'm not coming back here again. I don't want to be a child again, a baby in the fetus, being born to parents who don't know anything dharmically, having to go to grade school and high school again, see? Becoming a professional, groomed for success and money. I don't want to do that again. I've done that once that I can remember. I've probably done it many more times, and I'm done with that. I'm through with it. So the inner sadhana, if it appears in you, that means you're working on that. What else? You intensify spiritual practice over time. Like Sixon, when he was in his 30s and I was still in my 20s, he'd call me up. So we both interested in the same path, and he was like my mentor, and he'd say, Babaji, let's go and intensify our practice. It's Swami Vivekananda's birthday next month. I'll meet you in Portland at Swami Sheshananda's. Peace and bliss be upon him. And we'll put ourselves under the control of this old monk, you see, who can scold the hell out of you. As Lex said, the only man who could ever make me cry. See? And Lex was always happy. See? So he would use that, one of his favorite English words, intensification. Let's go intensify our practice. He really wanted this adventure of consciousness to kick in with myself and a few other people, younger people that he had taken under wing, you see, and was trying to inspire and push them forward like Swami Nikhilananda had done for him in New York at the Vedanta Society. Swami Nikhilananda, the one who translated the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna for us in those earlier days. Well, here's a good trick if you can do it. The sadhaka fixes senses and mind in a stable position. Can you claim that for yourself? Are my senses and mind fixed in a stable position all the time? Sattva, if you want to call it, or maybe even sattva shuddha, pure sattva. And can you do it effortlessly? See? So, I mean, there are stages inside of stages. You might say each one of these is kind of a measure, like and don't forget, we're comparing these 4 stages across 7 chakras. So that's why I say you transmigrated the desire. You transcended transmigration when you got to sadhaka level. You probably should, if you don't know that, admit it to yourself right now. You could probably look at all the confusion that's in the world right now. How much of it is affecting you day to day? How much does it fix your mind and senses in restlessness rather than in a stable position? And then, while you have that realization, say, oh, that's why I've given up the world. Oh, did I just say that? See, you surprised yourself because you're not admitting to yourself the world is an illusion. The world is unreal. The world is limited. The world is a place of 6 transformations. The world has 6 passions and 8 fetters and 9 limitations and all sorts of diseases and ills in it constantly arising in the mind. And I still want it. I'm not doing a very good job of assessment or intensification if I'm still holding out some desire for the world when I'm practicing spiritual life. You might as well default back to one of these other things. Well, I better go on eating organic food and keep doing my asanas. Maybe then, you see, I'll fix a ground for myself. Sri Ramakrishna, I always forget the disease, something like jaundice or something, or maybe that's a different story. He says there's a disease that makes you suffer all the way up to the end. Cholera, thank you. Cholera, if you have cholera, it's a disease, he said, that makes you suffer all the way up to the end, and you're fully conscious as you have it. So it's a very painful disease to have. So he's not talking about just, medicine and diseases and all. He's talking about the person who hasn't given up the world yet and is still practicing spiritual life. What kind of a dichotomy, a contradiction is that? Why are you practicing spiritual life then? Well, if it's to just enjoy the senses more, then you're not fixed and firm in the goal yet. There's something really rotten in Denmark in that quotient. So, you have a right to live a life of pleasure. You have a right to live a life of contentment. You have a right to live a life of dharma and balance. That's different, you see. Because in these ways, the world's receding and Brahman's coming into view. So you want to intensify your practice. So whenever Lex called me on the phone and said, yes, I'll meet you there. I don't have the money for a ticket, but I'll find it, you see. So we were poor back in our 20s. So we'd find our way to a great teacher and intensify our studies. We would hear the scriptures. See, that becomes later here. You see, studies. Oh, that's next. Nice. It studies the revealed scriptures with a guru. See. So, he's talking the Gita. oh my gosh, he can recite the entire Gita by memory in his 90s. What happened to loss of memory? How did he get beyond that? And he can recite it in Sanskrit and English, to boot. So we'd sit there listening to a living Upanishad with its mouth open. They called Vivekananda that when he came west. Knew the scriptures thoroughly. That's, fifth chakra kind of stuff. See? It really opened up the channel there. You can not only understand it, you can speak it. You can maybe even be able to convince people to believe in it, which is very hard back down in the lower chakras. They believe in matter. Though, if people who were worldly and just into matter alone were watching this movie for a little while, this video, this film we're doing right now, they would think I'm crazy. I understand this. I realize this. I think they're crazy, and they think I'm crazy. And the proof is in the pudding, though. Do you have peace of mind? Are you free from boredom and depression? Does the world bother you anymore? Because Krishna says, that one whom the world cannot afflict and does not afflict the world, that one is a yogi. So I got that from studying the scriptures. It was one of my favorite slokas out of the Gita. I heard it from Swami Sheshananda. That one who does not afflict the world and whom the world cannot afflict. So it goes both ways. I'm peaceful to that, even though it's disgusting in many of its expressions. And since I know that it's unreal, it does not get into me like water can't get into a duck's feathers. You have to keep the boat in the water, not let water in the boat. Sri Ramakrishna said. The boat is your body-mind mechanism. You can't let the water of nonsense and hypocrisy get into your mind. So there's the proof of the pudding. You see, can you stay peaceful? Can you stay balanced? Does your ideal remain in the forefront of your what? Third eye, Ajna Chakra, white dove ascending, Dharma Eye. We'll look at that after the break. Let's finish up this and then take our break. Basically, praise inwardly in a state of intrinsic connection. So the key word there is inwardly, because praying for a God outside to help you, India's never favored that. You'd be better to seek yourself as the answer to your own prayers. If you really opened up a channel to yourself, that would be the God that you pray inwardly to, and then you'd be granting yourself peace, steadiness in senses, steadiness of mind, a guru. Those things would come to you naturally as a matter of course. If you prayed to an inward position like Ishvara, you get to the Father through the Son. It's there in other religions. But is the prayer outwardly to a Jesus who passed from the body 2,000 years ago and hasn't come back yet? Or is it to the inner Jesus, which is one with yourself? I and my Father are one. You have to ask yourself that and find out if the bear in your cave, is keeping you from claiming your oneness with human souls like that. Why did you get into a religion and a tradition if it wasn't to understand great souls like that and become one with them? Like a hailstone falling in an ocean. Or in this case, a hailstone falling in a river, and then the river flows to the ocean. However it works for you in stages. So we will look at these other two stages at the end of our break. Here we will take our break for 15 minutes, and the live streaming audience will be able to look at this chart up close and see its innuendos and its subtleties. And then we will rejoin you soon. Namaste.